Welcome to Roadcase, the podcast that explores the live music experience. Thanks for joining us. I'm your host, Josh Rosenberg, and I'll be taking you on a journey through in-depth interviews with performers and key people in the industry to explore the magic of live music, how it can be totally transformative for both fans and performers, and we'll look at how they take it all out on the road. It's going to be a great ride, so here we go. Hey everyone, welcome to Roadcase. Thanks for joining me. I'm Josh Rosenberg, your host, and we got a great episode today, and we got a bunch more coming up. And if you've been listening and tuning in, I appreciate that. And you know that I'll remind you to get involved with the Roadcase community, and there's a bunch of different ways you can do that. You can join the party over at Patreon and support this podcast by going to patreon.com/roadcasepod. We got a couple of goodies over there, and we're going to also be having some exclusive content at Patreon for subscribers, so go check that out. You can also email at info@roadcasepod.com. I love getting emails. I mean, who doesn't really? And you can check us out on the socials, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And we also have a YouTube channel at Roadcase Podcast. And of course, you already know that you can subscribe to this platform or to this podcast on your favorite listening platform. And while you're there, it would be really helpful for us if you could rate and review Roadcase as well. So I'm really excited to have Jim Keller on Roadcase. Jim is a co-founder of the 80s band Tommy Tutone. He co-wrote the tune that you'll know as Jenny 8675309, the famous 80s tune that I happen to think is a pretty cool tune, but I've been rattling around in my head for a little while. And Jim will talk to us about what that means to have been a pop sensation band at the time, and what that evolution looks like to what Jim is doing today. And I mean, they opened up in the 80s for Tom Petty at Red Rocks, among other things, and they did crash and burn, using his words. But as he also said, pop bands are not meant to be long-lived, but that song lives on, and we'll hear some stories about that. Jim then went on to become the manager for the classical music composer Phillip Glass, and said he was kind of living a schizophrenic life, working in the classic music world during the day and then jamming at night. His love of music goes deep, and he is a musician's musician who plays with a ton of his musical friends and musician friends in New York City, first at the Lakeside Lounge and then at the Rockwood Music Hall. He's been doing that for many, many years, kind of an open door musician jam policy, and we'll look at that a little bit. But Jim is about to release a new solo album called By No Means, and it comes out on February 12th. He's got a bunch of really great musicians playing on that album with him, including David Hidalgo of Los Lobos and Nels Cline of Wilco. It's also produced by Mitchell Froom, who has done work with Bob Dylan and Paul McCartney, among others. It's a really beautiful album. Thanks again for tuning into Roadcase for this episode with Jim Keller. I know you'll find it really interesting, and his background in both the pop world and the classical world, and just the pure musician's world, the jamming with others, provides some really interesting contrasts and great stories to draw on. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in today. I want to thank Jim Keller again for being here on Roadcase, and here we go. Hey, Jim, thanks for joining me. How are you?
I'm good, Josh. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome, man. I really appreciate your time. Where are you joining us from?
I am in scenic Brooklyn, New York.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah. Where there's about 2 feet of snow, so it is very pretty right now.
Yeah. I was going to say, yeah, I'm in Chicago. You probably know. Yeah, it snowed a ton here too, but yeah, like a foot here is kind of a non-event. But well, thanks for joining me. We were just talking about Jenny. What was that number again? 867-723.
I'll leave it to you. I'll leave it to you.
Everyone knows the number. And just like What a great song that is, and, I had some trepidation to start out the interview with that, but, like, you're that song, so what has it been like over the years to have that legacy?
Um, well, it's all good, for
Yeah.
starters.
Mhm.
It's funny though that, after the band crashed and burned, there was a dip where it kind of fluttered around, you know, um, the ground. And then, I don't know, 10 years after it was hit, it started slowly percolating up. And it's just wild how it's continued. All of a sudden, like my generation, and then the generation below, and the next generation, and now there's, I just posted a video. I got these 14-year-old kids from Massachusetts sent me a video of their band playing it in their garage,
Yeah, of
and
course, right.
they're 14 years old. Where they're hearing it somewhere, but fortunately, it was for me to be a part of something that there's clearly some little piece of magic that floats around with that song, and I'm just I feel lucky that involved in it. Because
Yeah, well
it doesn't have to happen that way.
yeah, right, but I mean, it's all good, yeah, and, I mean, I'm not blowing smoke, that's one of my favorite songs from the '80s. I mean, it's
Yeah.
still, and I revisited it with, in front of, talking to you, and,
Mhm.
it resonates, man, and it's just something about that tune. I don't know, maybe it's just the number, maybe it's just
Well, I knew it the first time because I wrote that with a friend of mine named Alex Call, and he had put the basis together of that song, and he and I were writing together, and I showed up at the little crib he had at the time out
Mhm.
near San Quentin in Northern California,
Yeah.
and I heard that, and I went, "Man, what is that?" And we immediately started playing with it and kind of finished it off, and I didn't think it was gonna be a hit, no one thinks that, but we just knew it was intoxicating. There was something about it was fun. And I remember then I brought it into the band, my partner, Tommy Heath, and as soon as I started playing that chord progression, it was just something happened, so it was like giddy up and go, and
Yeah.
it's true to this day, fortunately, and then, between what Tommy and I did with it and his great vocal on it, and
Yeah.
our guitar parts, there's no such thing as a bad version of that song. You can go to hear any bar like these 14-year-old kids, and it's kind of like Louie Louie or something where there's just something about it that just works, and
Yeah. Yeah.
which is great. Yeah,
And of course, I watched the video, and with Roadcase focusing on live music, I couldn't help but be interested in the fact that it was based on a live performance of the song with the video, the story interspersed, and edited throughout, right? So that was very interesting to me. How did that was that a conscious decision? Like we want to get out there, we want to play the song. We're not just gonna do a song with the back being in the background in the story.
well, the recording is all done in a studio, so
Well,
that
yeah,
was
yeah, yeah,
really
yeah. But
that
still, you
was
guys
just
are out
the
there
video
playing
thing.
the right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah, totally.
How did that come about?
Honestly, that was so long ago. I don't even remember.
This is actually a memory test.
Yeah, I'm the wrong guy. I'm the wrong guy for that. All I remember is that I think it was in Pasadena. It was like in some concert hall in Pasadena where we shot that video. I believe. I think that's what it was. And
Yeah,
we might have even been playing live when we shot the video. I don't even remember. It might have been
yeah,
like, I think it might have been we did a free gig, like in an afternoon shoot or something when we were doing that.
uh-huh. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
it just was interesting to me because you've been playing live so much, and, we'll talk about the Rockwood Music Hall stuff, but it really was interesting to make that kinda jump, right, to at
Yeah.
least for me from an interviewing side, so,
Oh, yeah. Oh,
um, but now you've got this new album out, By No Means, and, coming out on, February 12th, is that
yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, so and that marks kinda you coming back after, 7 years or something like that for
Yeah, I
quite a
mean,
while.
it's my 4th, solo record, in the last
Mhm,
15 years or something, but
mhm.
there was a long pause between the last one and this one, for various reasons.
Yeah,
Um, it's like, I'm just happy it's here, uh, it was fun to do. It's always fun. I mean, I write all the time, I play all the time.
yeah.
I just didn't put a record out all the time.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Did COVID kinda kickstart you into, being in the studio with this album, or was that just, like,
No, the record was done before COVID started,
Oh, okay.
except for one track, which is the one that I recorded on my iPhone and sent to Mitchell, and he kind of blew it up. No, we recorded this out in LA before, and then the release got postponed because of COVID. Um, yeah, so it was done with David Hidalgo from Los Lobos and Bobby
Hmm.
Glob, who's an old friend of mine, plays with Jackson Brown now. Whatever, bunch of great players.
Yeah, you had Nils Klein on there too, who's a Chicago
Well,
friendly Wilco guy.
yeah, and Nels and a bunch of guys play on this one track.
Oh,
I
okay.
did this whole side thing where they all played on this one track called "Don't Get
Oh,
Me
cool.
Started." Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
right on, right on, right on. And after Tommy Tutone, you got involved for a long time as Phillip Glass's manager.
I
Um,
still am.
oh, you still are? Okay,
Yeah,
I didn't know if that was one of my questions. Is that?
yeah.
Uh, yeah, yeah. So how did that come about, and what was that the genesis of that, and was
Well,
that a
first
departure for you at the time?
departure. I didn't even know who he was, let alone you know.
Okay.
Yeah. What you got to do is you got to be young and be in a rock and roll band and go crazy and have a great time. And if you're fortunate, have a couple of hits, and then crash and burn, and then have no way to make a living for a while. And
Mm,
then you try to figure out what you're going to do. And for me, there was that. That was the arc. It goes up and it goes down.
yeah.
And when I went down, I didn't. I was still playing live a lot, but I wasn't really making any money. I moved to New York, and so I was trying to figure out what to do. And as I got older, and so I, through a random set of circumstances, met Philip, and he was looking for somebody at that stage to help him. And I kind of talked my way into a job. And so we've been partners with us, for over 25 years working together.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
Did live music figure into a lot of what he did? I mean, I know he did some opera. I'm not super familiar with his work, but um,
Well, it's a totally different paradigm. He's in the classical
yeah,
world, and
yeah,
he
of course.
tours.
But
He's toured his whole career, and he's had his ensemble, and there's been a lot, always a consistent live component for his career, and he does about 10 different things. Live performance is one of them, either with an ensemble, with film, by himself, solo, all sorts of different stuff.
right, right.
Yeah.
Um, I'm going to digress just for 2 seconds because I there was a question I wanted to ask about Jenny. Where obviously you guys played live around that album and that song. Where did you put it in the set at the time? Do you remember? Was it always the
Where do you
last
think?
so was it always the last song, or was it the first song? Was it the first? I've seen guys actually
Definitely.
do their biggest one, they've done, like, the first song, and then they've played it again for the last song.
Well, they're entitled, and God bless them if they had a hit they could do there with. But no, it was the first song on the record because we knew we didn't want
Yeah,
to waste anyone's time. Let's get straight to the hit.
right.
And it was always the last song. And I remember at the peak of that, it was so exciting. I mean, the first record we had a top 40 single on, and we toured with Petty. That was the big thing for us.
Ah,
Was that we
uh-huh.
we went from playing bars, literally playing at roadhouses up in Northern California, to opening for Petty at Red Rocks. That was insane. And we did
Wow,
that.
wow, what
We
do you
did.
remember what year that was?
Yeah, it was 1980. It was the refugee tour.
Oh, fuck.
Damn the torpedoes.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
we were playing bars. That's where we couldn't make a living in San Francisco playing gigs. So we'd play, roadhouses and Grange halls and all this kind of crazy stuff in Northern California for like hippies and cowboys and rednecks. And
Right.
and I remember Tom sent his lighting designer, who was a guy who had been playing with him since Florida. He was in the Mud Crunch band, the whole thing. Jim Lehrman, I can't remember his last name.
Uh-huh.
He flew up to San Francisco, drove for 2 hours north to where we were in this bar, the Branding Iron in Ukiah, California, and we played a gig and hung out with him, and he loved the band. And then he drove back down and flew back down to LA and told Tom and said they were great. And then we ended up opening for him at Red Rocks like 4 weeks later, or something ridiculous.
Wow, wow, that must have been amazing. What was that like?
Well, I was scared shitless. Are you kidding? I
Yeah.
mean, it was completely wild. And I remember the thing that was astonishing about it was we had been on the radio in Denver,
Mhm.
and I didn't really know, and I didn't know what the effect that stuff had. And so when we started playing, instead of people throwing stuff at us, I saw them singing along with what we were doing, and it was like, my God, they actually know the songs. And that was the thing it totally stunned me. Was like,
Yeah, it's
the power of radio, and
right,
then
right.
subsequently the power of MTV. But I hadn't been firsthand had any firsthand experience at that point of the connection between live performance and the radio and the impact on all that stuff. So that was very cool.
Yeah.
At any rate, I think we
Um,
were talking about 867. There, we used to play it twice when it was a hit,
yeah,
and
that's what I thought. I was like, "Why
yeah,
not?"
yeah. Well, we'd play it and then we just play it again because people didn't want to go home. They just it was at that moment, it was such a spark with that song that it was like a shared experience. You know what I mean? It wasn't about us up there being rock stars or anything. It was kind of like we're all in this together. This is like, man, this is really cool. And so
Yeah,
we did
wow.
do it. We did do it twice a few times in those kind of things.
And at Red Rocks, Tom didn't come out and sing it with you at the end.
Well, no, 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 no.
Um, well, you said that band crashed and burned. What do you mean by that?
um, well, people always say, "Why did you guys break up?" And that's never really the question. It's why do other bands not break up? I mean, you're not pop music is not supposed to be here for that long.
Right.
Pop culture. If you look at, I mean, I always remember being astonished at one point when I read how old Benny Goodman's band was when they played at Carnegie Hall. They're all in the 20s, like early 20s. And it's our rock and roll is kind of an aberration because we're not you're not supposed to be around forever. And I think the baby boomer generation, in a way, has kind of extended the life of this. But the Who and the Rolling Stones, as brilliant and amazing as they are, I don't really have any business still playing. Being like at the forefront culturally. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
Yep.
that's a long-winded way of saying pop bands aren't really supposed to last for a long time.
Yeah.
We're supposed to crash and burn, and most of us do. Matter of fact, 90% of them crash and burn. Um, and I feel like I'm just fortunate that I had the, the peak to crash from in that
Yeah, that you
experience.
guys crashed super hard because you were like so way up there, right?
Yeah, and then we had all the classic stuff. All the all all the food groups were the drugs, the whatever, the fighting, the record labels, the management. That it all kind of crashed at the same time. And we weren't built for longevity, and I think other bands are. And I can tell the difference now, and I certainly didn't know it then. I mean, I was relatively cognizant of it, but when you're in the middle of it, you think it's just going to go on for a long time. But there are some artists that are definitely built for the long road and some that aren't. And we weren't really built for it that way. We were a ratty bar band, and Tommy and I always fought the whole time we were together.
Right.
So it was kind of logical that we didn't last a long time.
Right. But that must have been fun going around and playing that song and playing just having that sort of notoriety and at least having that one just huge hit to play at shows. Um, Clearly you were getting incredible response from it everywhere, even live. It must have been just off the hook to just to be part of that. What was that
Yeah, it
like?
was. It was totally great. I remember we were opening for Cheap Trick in Pittsburgh, I think, when our manager came back and said, "We just hit the top 5 with 867." And it kind of fluttered around, and then it took off.
Mhm.
And the audiences and the thing is we'd already booked the tour, so we were playing either opening dates or in small venues, and the places were going nuts, when
Yeah.
that it was just so exciting. It was totally great.
Right, right. So
Um,
you were playing kinda smaller venues and then got picked up by Cheap Trick? Was that before you were
well,
playing with
no,
Petty or
no, this was after that, but we were doing opening dates for various people, but then when the record hit, we had already booked these tours where we're still opening for people.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
at
yeah.
that point, we could have headlined, but we had already committed ourselves
Right.
to either opening for someone or playing a small bar, a small roadhouse, or I mean, whatever, a small club. And with that, we could have totally outsized, but we had already committed ourselves. So we were playing these small places um, with a fantastic energy because of the hit.
Yeah. Did it change the way you interacted in the band and your mindset going forward and writing other material and, like, subsequent tours?
Um, well, God, it's hard to really remember, but we didn't really. We tried to duplicate, and were unable to duplicate the writing from that song. And there were some good songs on the third record, but there was nothing that rose to that, that spot. And at that point, we were also falling into all those holes that I
Yeah,
alluded to earlier.
which you
So
kindly referenced as the food groups.
yeah, yeah, right, right.
Yeah. But then, so then you're in with Phillip Glass. That, I mean, it was like yeah, I mean, it's completely different, right? But what were some of the most interesting things that you encountered in that world?
Well, totally different. I'm like, playing the Lakeside Lounge was my residency here in New York for years, and then when that closed, I moved to the Rockwood Music Hall. So I'm playing those kind of venues with all the fantastic players that are in town here, and I have a
Hmm.
revolving door group of musicians that I work with,
Yep.
and it's kind of like whoever shows up, and there's 25 or 30 guys that can play a gig with me at the drop of a hat that know my stuff. And then during my day job, I'm up, at the at the opera house, at the Metropolitan Opera House. So
Yeah.
it was a little schizophrenic.
Yeah, I bet. But that's admirable. You kept doing what your heart was into it. I'm sure your heart was into the Philip. I mean, being a manager for Philip Glass, obviously, but you were doing what really inspired you as well was to get in front of audiences. Tell me a little bit about how did that come about, and how did you get this coterie of musicians to play with you, and what was your thinking in starting that? Was it a formal arrangement or informal arrangement?
Well, I actually stopped playing for a bunch of years when I started
Hmm.
working with Philip because I just felt like I wasn't getting anywhere with the music, and I had to dig into this to try to figure out how to make a living.
Yeah.
And that didn't work. And at a certain point, it just my life didn't work. And basically, aside from my family, music is the most important thing to me. Period. So when I started playing again, I started just tapping into this whole group of musicians that are in town. I have a jam every week, and I just call people and say, "Who wants to play Tuesday?" And I literally up until the pandemic. Matter of fact, Thursday, March 12th
Hmm.
was the last jam, and
Yeah.
that was like Andy Hess and whatever. It's a bunch of great players, and uh, so I started doing that, and basically, it was fun, and people liked coming in because I basically, had a room, a studio, and whatever we were playing is what was happening. And it was a chance for me to work up my songs, but I wasn't dictating how people should play or what they should play. So it's like whoever's in the room on any given day is what that song is that day. Which
Mm.
is totally cool, because
Right.
some drummer will start off and play a completely different groove than the guy who was in last week. And so I was doing that regularly. And then I just started taking that and formalizing it a little bit and structuring it so I could go then play, gigs
Yeah.
with the bands that were available at the time. And I mean, at that point, it was Byron Isaacs, who's in the Lumineers, and
Mhm.
he's also my writing partner. He
Oh,
was in it, and Chris Masterson, who's Steve Earle's guitar player, and Glenn Patcha, who's Bonnie Raitt's keyboard player, and
wow.
I don't
Wow.
remember. I mean, it's all like they're not making a living with playing with me, believe me. So they're all like, who's not on tour,
Yeah.
and then we play a gig. And when you live in a place like New York, and in Brooklyn, where there are at this point right now, it is just unbelievable how many just really soulful players there are here.
Yeah.
And it's I feel incredibly lucky every time I'm playing. And when I play gigs, I always have, it's not just the five guys. I mean, I'm not exaggerating, but there's probably 12 people that show up on the stage. I have people sit in constantly. And we
Mhm.
change the whole band. I'll play half a set with one rhythm section, then change the rhythm section. And it's
Wow.
really part of it is just that shared experience and all those guys that love, it's basically just love playing and
Yeah.
in a loosely structured kind of setting.
And that was, it used to be Lakeside Lounge, and now more
Yeah.
recently it's at Rockwood Music Hall.
Yeah.
Was that, f would you charge for admission for those that wanted to listen, or how would that work from a, spectator, listener, fan standpoint?
Well, I just had this thing where I don't want a musician buddy not showing up. He's got to pay 10 or 15 bucks. So I never charge at the door.
Hmm.
Um, and the guys were doing it with me because they wanted to. It's not, no one was up there for the money. And as much as I'm a firm believer in the musicians should always be paid, at the same time, I don't want to charge them.
Yeah, yeah, right.
So it was a really a loose thing, and it'll be back, but I don't know what it's going to look like when the whole thing dies down with the pandemic.
Yeah, I'll come check it out. But so anyone could just walk in and check it out, and
Yeah.
yeah, and had you contemplated using a rehearsal hall somewhere in a more formal setting, or was this kind of like that in a proxy for using a rehearsal hall, but had the feeling of being of playing in a venue, which kind of added to.
Well, the thing is, I've been doing this long enough, and with the same like 25, 30 guys that any 3 or 4 groups of those people know half the songs I play in a set. And then if I was doing new songs that I wanted to actually, okay, we got to figure out what the beginning, the middle, and the end is. So
Yeah,
we'd have like I'd figure out a jam where we could go through, some of those things. So it wasn't like completely, free form jazz, but uh, it wasn't like we were sitting around studying and rehearsing at that point. It was guys that knew most of the stuff, and then we'd figure out if there were new songs, we'd work them out, before we played the gig.
right. And I noticed Rockwood Music Hall is doing some live streams now. Were you getting
Yeah.
involved in those recently?
No, I haven't done that. Yeah, I'm not sure they're doing it anymore either. But no, I haven't done any live stream stuff. We did do a video recording thing for the new record, which we're kind of putting out as promotional stuff. But it's a lot. Even that it's heartbreaking. But literally that was March 12th when those guys we all walked out the door, and that was the end of it. March 13th. I remember there was that was like the D-Day
Right.
here anyway in New York. And the next time I was in a room playing was whatever it was 2 or 3 weeks ago when we did this thing. Everyone's wearing a mask except for me, and it's just peculiar because you can't read what the other musicians their facial expressions,
Yeah. Oh,
and
yeah. Interesting.
so
Right.
it's like, oh man, this is like, does this suck? Or is this fun? It's like, of course it was fun, but the thing is, you can't read that. Normally, you're like looking right at your buddy, and like we're
Did
all
that? Yeah. How did that affect you musically? Did it affect you
well,
musically?
yeah, it did because it was just felt a little off. It just
Hmm.
felt a little off, and I had to kind of, you play through it anyway. It doesn't matter, and everyone
Yep.
plays great, and the stuff sounded great, but it's just a little odd. You're just not. It's new, and obviously everybody's dealing with this. Everybody has to do the same thing right now.
Yeah,
So
right. I mean, we're all dealing with it. I mean,
yeah,
yeah, with especially, I mean, you're even harder hit when you've got so many musicians in the same room that you're bringing in a rotating basis. Small bands with like 4 guys, they're just creating their own bubble and just, not playing with masks on when they're that
yeah.
kind of, yeah, you can't do that
I
at
don't know.
all, right? Yeah.
Not conscientiously. Not really.
Right, right, right. No.
It's,
Well,
it's. I mean,
not in
I
good
do have.
conscience. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I have friends that are doing that. They have create a little bubble with their 3 buddies or whatever it is, and they've been able to do it, which is great. But not me. Not yet, anyway.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. I'm
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
thinking about, how that works. Not no judgment at all, for sure. Everyone's got
Yeah.
their own line in the sand on that.
Yeah.
So what was the most interesting thing about working for Philip Glass?
Well, first off, he's a genius. So there's,
Yeah, there's that
there's
small factor of being
that.
a musical genius. Yeah.
And it's just kind of amazing because I didn't know anything about his music, and I remember he asked me when he hired me. We've worked it all out, and I basically said, "Look, take a shot with me, and I'll if you don't like it, don't pay me, and I'll leave. But if you like it," and that was 25 years ago. But you know, this is a guy that gets up every day and writes music, and I always say, I write almost every day, and you got to show up. And I think the biggest thing I learned from Philip is that you just work hard. That's what he says. He always says, what is the key to your success?" He says, "Get up every day and work hard." And he's committed to what he does in a big way, but he also is really, really smart and
Yeah.
extremely talented. And he's a guy who also came up on the street in the way that he did it his way. He didn't go the path of least resistance. He said, "Screw you, I'm doing it my way." And people hated his music for years. Some people still do, but he says, "Too bad. This is who I am. This is what I'm doing." So that was very admirable.
Yeah, I love the you still gotta show up even though he's just an incredible musical genius. You still have to do what you do.
Yeah. I mean, I always say, people say, if I want to be successful, what should I, young artist, and I, well, the first thing you got to do is make sure you love what you're doing, and
Yeah,
figure out a way to do that. Live performance, whatever it is, but do it because you love it, and then you can hopefully take that, transition that into a career. But hopefully, you got to start out with something that you really are passionate about.
did you draw inspiration from that because you were and while you were still doing live gigs and playing your own music while you were managing him all those years?
It's. I mean, in all honesty, I'm not sure how much I really got in terms of from Philip that applied to my own musical life, because I was doing that anyway. And I've done that aside from that short period where I stopped. I mean, it was like that was my day job. And then I would take that and I basically have to shed that skin and go into the studio. And it's just, I got to leave that behind. So there wasn't a lot that I took from that with me, aside from the work ethic, and I'm not sure how much impact that had on me, but that work ethic is a big deal.
Yeah,
With anything you're doing, it doesn't really matter. But with the arts, where it's up to yourself to have it's the drive, and it's not like I'm making a lot of money from my music, and you gotta really want to do it bad, you know.
yeah, yeah.
And then when you do, the payoff is fantastic. I mean, every time I play a gig, I'm up there looking around with the players I'm playing with, and I'm just going, man, I'm the luckiest guy in the world right now. I mean, it was really funny. This one time, there was an old friend of mine came to one of my shows, and the
Mhm.
Rockwood 2 is not a small place; it's a medium-sized venue. And she says, "Jim, God, this was unbelievable. What are you going to do with this?" And I'm like, I started laughing. I'm going, "This was it. That this was this."
I am doing what I'm doing.
You don't get it. This is it.
Right, right.
And if you're fortunate enough to be able to have that in your life in any way, man, it's really great. And the live thing is, it's huge. How fantastic and fun that is.
Are you getting off on being with your buddies that are musicians? And is it more of that for you than it is with the audience or with the fans, for example?
Well, it starts with the musicians. It starts with me writing a song, and then goes into a room, and then I'm playing, and I'm not in there. Those guys are not in there because they don't like it. The only reason they're in a room with me is because they're enjoying themselves.
Mhm.
And then so there is this magical shared experience. The only equivalent I've ever had of that is in sports, where, and I mean, I'm not a great athlete at all, but if whatever I was playing, whatever sport, and you kind of like have this unspoken language. And with music, it's not like we're sitting there going, "Man, this was really great," but you just know it. And then the floor elevates when shit's really happening.
Yeah.
You guys just look at each other and you go like, "Whoa, man, that was happening." Someone might say something, but it's so that shared experience is so primary. And then you take that and put it on a live stage. So you're standing with a band of players where you have that shared camaraderie, and it's deep. It's beyond, it's the different animal than just like friendship or whatever. It's this other thing. It's
Right.
this musical thing. And then so you get up there and that's happening, and people hear that. An audience picks up on that stuff.
Mhm.
And you know the performance thing is a whole other beast. But before you're performing, to have that core of energy with players, um, again, is just a magical thing. And as an audience, people pick up on that. They pick up on whether the players are really digging the shit out of what they're doing.
Yeah.
And it's contagious, and especially if you have decent players. But I mean, it doesn't matter. If it's garage band, can have the same energy. But if the passion is there and there's that shared thing, and then that translates off the stage, then the audience becomes a huge part of that.
Yeah, are you drawing a distinction between the interplay that you have with your other musicians and the performance aspect of it?
Yeah, totally. and it's simultaneous, but they're two different girlfriends, you know?
Right. Yeah, yeah.
The that interplay that's going on the stage is very personal and very intimate, and it's acknowledgement of, like, tiny little things that just spark your life. It can be just some little riff that
Mhm.
somebody plays that's like, "Oh, man, where did that come from?" And, like,
Yeah.
the other guys know it's there. And then there's the projecting, into the audience and communicating with the audience, and me as the front guy, that's what which I also love doing. But that's a little different than being in that pit with the players. Yeah.
I mean, there are educated fans out there that hear that little piece that you're hearing too. I
Yeah.
would like
Yeah.
to I would sometimes I'd like to count myself in that in that part of educated audience that, like, also gets off on that thing that I know the musicians are getting off on as well on stage,
Yeah.
because it not only sounds great, but I also understand how it can be technically difficult, and it's also just a vibe where it all kinda comes together on a musical basis.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not that people don't get it, but they don't have to, because the energy of that creates, that spark that's created, it is flying off the stage. So people, they may not articulate the exact thing, but they're impacted by it.
Yeah, yeah. So, how has Rockwood sort of developed as in and of itself, apart from also your from your performances there and in these impromptu sessions? Do you have a sense of how it's developed as a place for musicians to go to um, in the city, either passing through or a place where budding musicians have played just to get in front of audiences, and where it sort of sits that ecosystem, in the city?
Well, those places change, historically, for, over the years. And I don't know how long Rockwood's been there at this point.
Mhm.
More than 10 years, I
Yeah,
guess.
something yeah, 10-ish, yeah.
Um, and I remember when the Lakeside closed, and we loved the Lakeside because um, they uh, you played there all night. And in New York, there's like five bands every 15 minutes. There's a new band going on, in most
Right.
clubs. And the Lakeside, it was just you. So it was like being out of town. It was like being up north, out of town, like up Northern California or whatever. And you
Mhm.
had a bar or a roadhouse, and you basically had to keep dancing all night.
Right.
So there was that is kind of unusual in the city. It was at that time. And the thing Rockwood has done, first off, they have great sound systems, so the rooms sound great, and musicians know, and man, they hate playing rooms that don't sound good. So the rooms sound good, and they have three rooms now, or they had. They had a little bar that I used to play at too. That was, kind of just a little bar, and you play with four or five guys crammed
Yeah.
on. The drums are on the floor, and then they had the bigger room, and then they have another kind of more of acoustic kind of room downstairs. So they had all these different options, and I would always play on a Monday night. And Monday night it's like musicians' night, because it's the theaters are dark, so all the guys that are make a living on Broadway, they all go out, and that's when they can play gigs, regular gigs.
Right.
So it's not like a rule, but it just turns, has historically been, it's like when I'm playing a gig, I mean, there's easily 25, 30 musicians in the house, uh, without even counting my band,
Right.
because that's just everyone's out, and they're all checking out who's playing. And again, because I have a lot of people sitting in, there's different people coming in. I literally just say, I'll see you. Oh my God, James Maddox there. Come on up, play, come on, man, play a song.
Wow.
And then the bands that are on before and after me are also musician friends that, they've got, so everybody kind of gathers around like it's the watering hole,
Yeah. Yeah, wow. That's fantastic, man. That's
Yeah.
just
And I hope it comes back.
yeah, well, it will, it will.
Yeah.
Are you say that like, I mean, this is a temporary break in COVID, right? I mean, are you
Well,
saying that
yeah, but
because you don't do you think are there certain dynamics that you think, whereby your musician buddies aren't this is just it's not gonna be happening in the way that it used to happen for some reason?
I have no idea.
You're
I
just
mean,
kinda talking about just whether live music's coming back.
well, when? and at what point it'll look like you can go into a sweaty bar where you're body to body, you know, and hear a band. I don't know when that's going to happen. It's been a year. So, I mean, it's just, I have to assume that 2 years from now, hopefully that'll be going on. But then there's going to be this gray area in the middle where you're going to have to be safe. And I'm not sure what that's going to look like. Well, we'll have to deal with
Yeah,
it.
it's gonna look like a gray area where people are being safe.
Yeah. Or they're not, depending on what state you're in, so.
Yeah, well, I think, my experience in talking to people is that, music doesn't wanna be that industry where people are getting sick because they're enjoying it.
No, I know. Yeah. Yeah.
It's it's not just like the bars that wanna open in town, right? I mean, this is the
Yeah.
music industry that has a conscience and a moral compass as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there'll be fewer people at gigs and people will probably be masked for a little bit, but I'd like to be in the room with some live music being played at some point, and
Yeah.
I'll happily wear a mask for that. With
Yeah.
half
Play on.
By that time I think half the people in the country will probably be vaccinated. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, it's conjecture, but things are going to kind of look a little. There's going to be a new normal, and then there's going to be like, oh yeah, remember that 2 years ago?
That's right. Exactly. So, all right, let's
I'm will
let's get
I'm
there
will
quick.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, everyone's impatient. I'm willing to take the steps,
Yeah.
to get to where, because that's what we're gonna have to do, we're gonna have to walk
Yeah.
that for a while.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, what brought you back into the studio, and were there certain external conditions that, whereby, you waited quite a while for this new record? And the material I love, by the way.
Thanks.
Really great stuff.
Well, I think a lot of it was that my work got busy, and I have another company. I represent a bunch of other people,
Oh,
um, and I had to kind of, I didn't have the headspace to really focus on doing a record, and then I've kind of shifted that back away from work more, so there's more space for myself.
mhm.
And I was doing a project with Mitchell Froome, who's the producer, and Mitchell, who's actually in Crowded House right now, but he's produced 100. He did the Crowded House records way back when, and he's
He
produced.
was in Crowded House?
No, he is now. Just coincidentally, it's funny because they're
Oh.
going on the road,
Oh,
in Australia, New Zealand, and stuff like that. But
yeah.
he's produced Randy Newman and whatever, a million people. Uh, I sent him a bunch of songs and said, "Look, you want to check this stuff?" I just sent it. So I thought I just sent it to him, and he said, "Yeah, that's nice, Jim." But he came back and he had this idea of a record right away, with the material I sent, which was really uh, much more acoustic and more intimate than my other records. And I loved what he was attracted to about the
Mhm,
songs. And
mhm.
so we spent a while just kind of going through all the songs together, and then we did these sessions uh, with Mitchell as a keyboard player, and Bob Glove and David Hidalgo and Michael Urbano out in L.A. at Mitchell's studio. And so the genesis really was kind of Mitchell hearing my songs and gravitating towards the ones that actually, well, that I record right here in this room on this on my iPhone, and it's like me on the acoustic guitar, not even using a pick, and it's usually early in the morning, and I have a really low voice because I'm just kind of singing the structure of the song and the lyrics.
Yeah,
And so we basically made a record that was much more intimate in that way. Because what happens is if I write a song like that, then I take it into a room with a bunch of players, and I kick the whole thing up an octave just so I can cut through the band.
yeah,
So what we did is we basically stayed down at that intimate place
yeah.
where I am right now, with me and an acoustic guitar and just my thumb singing really quietly. And so we did the whole record, and it's a really simple record,
Mhm.
um, but there's a beautiful sophistication and simplicity. And when you get that, place where something can feel and seem really simple, doesn't mean it is. But when it feels that way, there's something really great about that when that works. So it was really, eye opening for me to do a whole record in that way, and very gratifying.
Yeah, I kinda had to do a mental double take. I'm like, "Is this Jim singing?" Like, a couple times just 'cause it's beautiful. It's low and it's resonant and it's like it's got a really, really great quality to it, so it's super interesting to hear how you put that together. how you
Well,
came about that. Do you like
yeah, I
singing in
mean,
the morning in general?
well, that's when my head's clear. So that's when the best writing is always done
Yeah, yeah,
before you look at a phone or anything. And the reality is that that's my voice.
yeah.
So it's like, you can try to I can try to sing like James Taylor, but I don't. Or whoever it is, Tom Petty
Right.
or take your pick, and I think that, sometimes it takes a long time to figure out where your sweet spot is. So at this stage of my life, this is a sweet spot. So which is great.
Right. Do you envision taking those songs out on the road?
Yeah, I'd be out there right now if it wasn't for what we were
Mhm,
doing. Totally. Yeah. I
mhm.
mean, I had a gig in LA, whatever it was, in March 18th,
Yeah, right.
which we canceled.
Yeah, you
So,
think?
yeah.
You
So that
said
was
you're, yeah, wow, yeah, I know the whole world has changed, but, you said there was an interim in the interim, you've been representing others as well. What do you mean by that?
well, I have a company that I work with. I've It's Ravi Shankar's publisher, Anushka Shankar's daughter, not Nora. I work with Tom Waits, and a number of young composers who were more known in the kind of film and opera world. And it's
Mhm.
just all the stuff that I learned from Philip. It's not the pop world. I've kind of like driven a line in the sand, and like there's the work side, and then there's me on the
Right.
other. So aside from Tom, is a little of both planets.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm interested also, in Philip as being a composer. Would he did you take him around on a tour around the world, or would how does that work with a classical composer when others are did he have his own he had a central orchestra at the Met, and then they would travel, or how would he get to other cities and have his works play to people around the globe?
Well, someone like Philip has so much going on all the time, all over the world, and he doesn't have to be there for it. Because if he has an opera or a symphony, he doesn't have to be at it. It's just
Mhm,
some other, unless it's a premiere. But he has the Philip Glass Ensemble, which has been around since the '70s,
mhm.
and they tour and they still tour. He's not doing it anymore. Just recently stopped, but they've been doing it since the '70s and going around playing with him and his music. And he also, as I was saying before, he goes out, he does solo touring. So we have all these different branches, and it's very different. If like Paul Simon does a gig and it says Paul Simon, you kind of expect Paul Simon to show up.
Right, right, right. Yeah.
But if it's Philip Glass, Symphony Number 12, Philip's not going to be there unless they say Philip will be, attending or something. It's his symphony. So it's one of the benefits of the classical world is you don't have to show up at every gig, and he's got stuff going all
Yeah.
over the world almost
So
every day.
what's the quality control, if you will, for lack of a better term, then in that scenario?
Well, there isn't any. The same way Paul Simon can't go into a bar and say, stop singing Bridge Over Troubled Waters because you're off key. You know, once something is published, you're anybody can perform your stuff. So some things are good and some things are bad. And
Mm,
the same way with pop music, you know. Um, I remember when Ellis Costello made a stink when Linda Ronstadt recorded Allison, or he pretended to make a stink. I'm sure he liked to pay the checks when they came in.
yeah.
But at that time, he was still had his new, punky attitude. But once it's published, anybody can sing your songs. So there is no quality control within reason. Yeah.
Right, interesting. So he's sort of basically licensing his songs around the world, and other, opera houses or other are picking it up and playing it if that's what's on their program. Is
Yeah,
that
they pay performance income the same way every time a
Yep,
song's played on the radio. They get
right,
performance income. Yeah.
right. Were you able to travel the world as a result of that job?
A lot, but I didn't tour. I didn't do it. We had hired other people to do all the physically running around because I never was really that interested in the touring life unless it was me. I
Yeah.
travel a fair amount, but I didn't really want to go out and do the tour bus routine with Philip.
Uh-huh, but you said on your
So,
own, though? Have you done that with Jim Keller Band, or
well,
what does that look like for
ma-
you over the years?
well, mainly. and mainly it's been here in New York and in Brooklyn. But
Hmm.
when the last record came out, I did some touring then. When that was, it was like 7 years ago at this point.
Right.
Um, but it hasn't been much, and we're looking forward to this year, but we'll have to hold off on that one.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think everyone has been.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's good stuff, man. Wow, that's you've done so many incredible and interesting things along your journey, right? I mean, it's
as long as
fascinating.
long
It's
as
fascinating
as
to me.
long as long as the journey keeps going, I'm happy.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's the George Burns thing or something like,
Well, I don't know. I mean, to me, it's all about, it's about what I'm doing to now. It's like, I remember I used to drive Tommy Heath, my partner, and Tommy Tutone crazy because I write all the time, and what's exciting to me is what I'm worked on this morning, and what I finished, 2 months ago, is a lot less interesting than whatever it is that I was working on this morning.
Right.
So, there's joy in both, but it's really to be able to kind of keep moving forward is really where it's at.
Well, so does that mean when you tour this new album that you'll be playing just new material? You're constantly working on songs. Will you play those in a live setting when you go forward? And
Oh, I've already thought this out because this record is so different. Like when we just did this live video thing,
Mhm.
it's me with acoustic guitar, and it's a very different vibe than my bar, club gigs at the Rockwood. I call it the usual mess, Jim Keller and the usual mess, because
Great
it's
name, great
just
name.
because it's like, okay, we're going for all the shit, and we're some stuff is organized and some stuff is not going to be organized, and that's the way it
Right,
goes.
right.
But with the new record is a much more specific thing. So I've always imagined that if I was fortunate, I would do my new record, and then I'd have the usual mess show up for the second half of the show. Um,
That would be
in
cool.
a perfect world, I'd do both.
Right. Odds of that happening probably low.
Well, no, odds are actually pretty good. I mean, I can certainly do that
Yeah,
in the
if you
major
do it at
markets.
uh-huh.
Well,
Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh,
I
because
mean,
you
when I
work
go
with
to
so many
LA,
guys, they're right, they're all over the country, right? You can just like
oh yeah, I have a set of gear in Los Angeles. I live at a
oh, right.
studio, and I do the same thing out there. I go out there. Who wants to play? So it's you know whatever. It's all my buddies out in Los Angeles, and we do the same thing. We go in a room
Yeah,
and we
right.
play.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Awesome, awesome. I can't wait. I can't wait, man. I'm psyched. I'm psyched.
Uh, Well, hopefully we'll get to Chicago. Bring the mess.
Yeah, you better. Yeah, that would be great, man. I would look forward to it. So, thanks again for joining me, Jim. This has
Sure.
been really interesting, man. Thanks. I'm sorry. I hope I didn't
Uh,
tax your memory too much on all the old stuff, man.
well, it just made me seem old if I couldn't remember. So, but that's all right.
Man, I was in college when Tommy Tutone was writing, almost in college, you know?
There you go. Then you're
So
no
I'm not
spring chicken. So,
yeah, no, I'm not too far behind you. I mean, you can see
cool.
me on this thing. This is not blonde hair. This is kinda grayish. You can see the
Yeah,
Anyway, thanks again, Jem, for being here. Really
my
appreciate it.
pleasure.
Good luck with the new album, by no means. And was that February 12th, I think?
Yep.
That's
Yep.
great. That's
Thanks a
great,
lot.
man. Awesome. Thanks again for being here. I really appreciate your
Okay,
time.
Jack. Okay, cheers.
Take care. Okay, that was Jim Keller, co-founding member of Tommy Tutone and co-writer of 8675309 Jenny, which I don't know. That was just mind blowing to me to talk to Jim about that song and about the pop phenomenon around Tommy Tutone at the time. And it was so cool to hear his stories about playing live at Red Rocks in front of Tom Petty and playing with Cheap Trick and others, and what that was really like to be part of that incredible pop sensation of a song. And of course, there's the fall afterwards with the crash and burn, but Jim loves music, and Jim's a super hardworking musician and learned those lessons from Phillip Glass about getting up every day, writing music, and how being a creative artist, you just have to do the work and you've got to show up. And if you're doing what you love, the hard work is not so hard to do. So you had better love it. And Jim put that into practice almost on a daily basis with his jam sessions with friends and the open door policy at Lakeside Lounge and Rockwood Music Hall in New York City, where he'd play in a pre-COVID world, just get together with a bunch of friends and pull them out of the audience and play different tunes. And, he was just practicing his craft on a daily basis. And he's got an album coming out this week on February 12th called By No Means, with tons of great artists playing on that album. And it's really beautiful, so check it out. So I want to thank you all for listening to Roadcase again and for tuning in. And I want to thank Jim Keller for sharing his experiences with me on this episode of Roadcase. Thanks again so much for listening, and I'd like to encourage everyone to get involved with Roadcase. You can do so in a number of different ways. You can email me at info@roadcasepod.com with questions, comments, and even suggestions for guests. Or you can follow us on the socials, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. We're at RoadcasePod, and we have a YouTube channel called Roadcase Podcast. And if you are able to and like to support Roadcase, we have a Patreon site at patreon.com/RoadcasePod. And of course, you can subscribe to this podcast on your favorite listening platform. And if you could please rate and review the podcast while you're there, that would be great. So I want to thank Walzer for this awesome theme music that we have. And I want to thank all of you for tuning in and listening to Roadcase. We have a lot of great episodes coming up, so I'll see you on down the road.